Hi, I'm Mark from Property Ventures. Welcome to this week's New Zealand Property Podcast, where we interview the property expert around New Zealand. Property Ventures, and you're in for a real treat over the next 2 weeks. We are running a two-part podcast where I talk generally about all things property with Matthew Gilligan from GRA. Matthew has done and seen more than most in property, and in the first of these two podcasts, we discuss large-scale developments, the pitfalls and the must-dos. We finish up the podcast discussing how to find and negotiate great property deals. Welcome again to our latest podcast. Tonight we talk to experienced property developer Matthew Gilligan, who is a chartered accountant for GRA. Welcome tonight, Matthew, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Good evening, Mark. For those of you that don't know me, my day job is chartered accounting. I'm managing director here at Gilligan Rowe and Associates up here in Auckland, and pretty much my focus is tax and legal structures, designing tax and legal structures for the over 5,000 entities that we act for as a practice. But what lots of people don't know about me is I'm also a property developer and I've got a buy and hold portfolio. So half of my day job these days is actually working for my own entities. And at the moment, I'm pretty focused on buy and hold strategies here in Auckland because I'm excited about the Auckland market. But in years gone by, I've developed 250 sections, roughly, give or take a few, in Central Otago and Gisborne. And I've been doing a bit of development offshore in Australia, in Melbourne. I've done 10 sort of small infill subdivisions over there, ranging from 1 into 2 to 1 into 20. So a bit of Australian experience. Last year I was also doing a bit up in the States. I bought 50 houses up there and flipped them last year, buying small investment houses, packaging them up and selling them off to people interested in investing up there. So, yeah, day job, tax and legal structures, MD at GRA, and in addition to that, doing my own property stuff, which is of interest to clients as well.
Great stuff. And you have, as you can see, and for the listeners there, we're speaking to a pretty experienced fella that's obviously had a lot of good experiences and bad experiences. And that's what we're going to do in this chat. We're going to talk about developments and different parts of that we can learn from, and then later on we'll talk about different deals and ways you can do deals when buying property. So obviously you have been through a lot and done a lot. Can you just tell us about some of your experiences and maybe what has been the biggest learning experience that you've had? And I'm not sure if that would restrict to one experience when you've been in all, a few different countries by doing what you're doing.
Yeah, learning experiences. God, where do you start? There's so many in property development. The first thing I'd say to people is, if you are a land developer, you just carry such enormous risk, because you can get your timing perfect. You can you can 100% sell your asset base down at the top of the market and finish your development on time, on budget, but you can't control the environment. And I had, I remember I had about $40 million worth of debt in 2008. Going into 2009, I had about $45 million worth of pre-sales, so I was in good shape. And about 60 something of asset, 65 of asset. So
you're making me feel good to the situation I was in, Matt, at the same time.
I was trying to flog some of it to you if you could.
Yeah.
And so I remember talking to my bankers at the time, which was South Canterbury, and they told me that I was one of the best they had, which was good for my ego on the day. And nobody paid us, so we had about 20 something million of settlement failure. And my bank went broke, South Canterbury went broke. And on one of our developments that I was running down there in Gisborne, we had a bad day where one of the digger drivers unearthed a metal object that looked like a cannonball So he reported this to the Historic Places Trust, who sent some bearded man in Roman sandals over to the site, who decided that this cannonball was a Spanish cannonball. And it proved that the Spanish were in New Zealand, and that predated Cook, so it rewrote New Zealand history. So he reported this to the Prime Minister's office, and they decided that our 100 sections that we were $7 million through developing should be put on hold while they, investigated this theory and started to excavate the site looking for more cannonballs. And in the same week, we had some local person produce a photo of our site flooded. There was a storm event in 2007 that flooded the site. And of course, when you're developing tracts of land, you're not allowed to discharge into streams, so you block all the drainage up. So you effectively create a giant swimming pool during development. So there was a 100-year water event when the site was a metre deep in water. So somebody took a picture of this from the hillside during the peak of the storm event and used this as evidence the floodplain was higher than the engineers believed it was. So they invoked a Section 128 notice on us, which I didn't even know existed, revoking our resource consent retrospectively. So we were $7 million in a hole. We had bearded men from the Prime Minister's office trying to find, evidence that Cook was not first to come to New Zealand. And we had our resource consent revoked, and we had the GFC on top of us. And that would I think that is what you describe as a learning experience.
Yeah, that's better than most stories, Matt.
And we got rid of the archaeologists, or wherever they were, the historians, and we, through brute force, peer-reviewed our engineering with 5 opinions from 5 different engineering firms, explaining in Braille that if you block up drainage, a site will turn into a swimming pool. It took 5 engineers to explain that to council. And got through, settled, and luckily, or unluckily, however you look at it, we had the air career to burn, so we didn't melt down in the GFC like other less fortunate people. But I always say to people that if you're going to develop property, understand you've got that risk right till the day you're paid, and there's significant risk in large land developments. And the biggest one is environment. The environment can change, and things totally beyond your control, like what council's doing or what the banking system's doing, can come in and just sweep all your equity down a hole and say, that's the end of that.
Yeah, and I can vouch on the smaller time developments and what have you. Things get delayed. It's just a matter of what happens, and the time of the market can turn out to be not great, as obviously happened there also. And as I said, the environment, you can only predict so much. You can't change politically what happens, and other factors these days as well.
Well, it was amusing when our bank went broke. We knew times were bad when our bank was going broke.
Yeah, it's not a good start. Great. Okay. That's a good story, Matt. So thanks for sharing that one. In fact, just on that, did that development get finished in the end?
Yep. We built it out, and a lot of the people that couldn't pay us, this is an interesting recovery strategy, a lot of people that couldn't pay us wanted to pay us, but the banks wouldn't lend them any money. So I built a mortgage book and vendor financed them into the settlements.
Right.
And funnily enough, out of 20-something million of settlement failure, I didn't bankrupt a single person.
Right.
And I interviewed I hired a guy, put him in to interview every single one of them. Most people were very cooperative and said, look, we don't want to not pay you. Kiwi's good like this. It's not the case overseas at all, but I've found in New Zealand most Kiwis want to do the right thing. And we just did a deal with everybody. And some of them just had nothing, so we just wrote them off and see you later.
Yep.
And others we financed them into the assets, and all of them have now refinanced me out and, got through. So that was a good recovery strategy. Build a mortgage book out of the settlement failure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. And when there's a will, there's a way, and there's always more than a couple of ways to do it. So yeah, well done with that. And as you said, it wasn't only you being affected by the environment of the market changing. It was all the people you pre-sell these places too.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's a bit of a horror story, and but as you said, there's still ways to get out of it, and you did. So tell us what's probably been your best development, or major development, and why would you say it's been your best? What factors contributed towards that?
We did a couple of subdivisions in Central Otago prior to the big ones we did. They were small, sort of 30 land block subdivisions and 30 section subdivisions, and they were identical to the other ones. They just went through and settled as they should have, and we made the money. We were making good money out of it, and we were rolling forward our profits. And even these developments that we got clobbered on through settlement failure, I wouldn't say they were bad developments. They were we just didn't make the money we expected. And we're still doing them, and we're starting to make money out of them now, because with the environment improving, the residual of our Central Otago holdings is starting to stand up and cash up. So we're getting some equity out. But certainly that Central Otago land that we were developing in the early days, the first sort of 60 sections went very well. And it was just real basic stuff: buy the land, get a consent, sell the land off the plans to purchasers, off a brochure, indicative boundary settings with the right to change the boundaries with changes of consent processes. Then you bank the development of the pre-sales, 10% deposits, 15% deposits with pre-sales. A bank comes in and funds it. It's amazing what you can do. You can have very little deposits and create quite large developments, because the banks take the pre-sales as your collateral. And we did very well the first couple of developments.
The Central Otago market, now is one of the markets around the country that took the biggest hits, I think, in 07 and 08, and I won't have to tell you that, obviously. But now there are a couple of markets that are going particularly well, right now. In fact, I was talking to a couple of agents there again today, and it's certainly hotting up there, and there's so much reason for that to continue to happen, I think. So I'm sure majority of the people you sold to back then and now will be pretty happy with what they've got. And the other point of that, when I was down there recently, it was the Cromwell there. It just looks fantastic there, and it's been a credit to what you've sort of done on that particular development.
Yeah, it's a canal subdivision. I forgot to mention it's a canal subdivision, and we built a pub and 24 units and a lease back to the pub. We've built 12 of them out. We've got the other 12 to build out, but the sections, we were selling the lakefront sections for 400, 450, and the rest of them sort of at maybe half of that. That stuff devalued up to 2/3, and now it's back at 400. So it's recovered.
Yeah, and that's a great area of recovery at the moment. So what we're going to do tonight also, we've got Matthew here. We want to talk about a whole lot of different deals, which will flips, buy and holds, and etc., which we'll get into shortly. Just before we move on, is there any more in developments that you'd like to just point out to anyone listening here that's really keen on doing a larger type development? That's what we've talked about so far. I
think if you're going to do a larger development, your number one risk to manage. In fact, the first step of planning a development is plan to fail.
Yep. And
it's a funny thing to say, but put all of your assets in trust that are not related to the development. Don't give them to the bank. Don't cross-secure them. And that gives you a tremendous comfort if you're standing in the middle of a GFC and you owe a bank $40-something million. It gives you great comfort to know you're never going to be a poor man because you've got everything tucked away. And the way I looked at it, I was very philosophical about it. I had $20 million of development margin in the pot, and a fair bit of that got washed away with the GFC. And now I'm getting it back again, some of it. But if the environment got worse and became more impaired, such a situation could have rolled me, quite frankly. And there were lots of guys that were the same size as me and larger that got rolled, and some of them were colleagues of mine that I had a glass of wine with. And these guys, it really disappointed me that their advisors had not said to them, look, you should ring fence stuff. Don't put it all in one trust. Have separate entities for separate developments. Because you just have so much power if you can turn around to a bank and say, look, I'm plus 10 million over here and minus 15 over there. You guys are actually on toast here. You've got so much power if you can turn, and you don't have any ability to control a bank if you just mix them all together. They actually become incentivized to put a receiver in and take it over.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're going to be involved in larger scale developments, you have to control the banks and you have to structure things in such a fashion as you've got a chance of things become impaired. And no matter how good the environment looks, because we went into this stuff in 05, 06, and it was just bulletproof. Amazing things can happen. Your bank can go broke. Consents that are supposedly rock solid that banks lend money against can get revoked. And if you've got the comfort that your base wealth is tucked away in robust structures, and you then advance with ring fencing between developments that you're involved in, that gives you a much better position to deal with the banks from. And a reason for the banks to keep dealing with you, because you actually control them with the right structures. And Mark, I tell you what, this applies from large-scale development right down to small mum and dads, perhaps even more so with small mum and dads, because the banks have less trust for them. And if they're going to do 1 into 2s or 1 into 3s and you run into trouble, you really want that wall between your home and your developments.
Yeah, well, and what we'll do is we'll have another podcast on entities and structures, and we'll go through that in a bit more detail, because it is so important for anyone out there. And I've seen a lot of people who haven't done it right and gone under. And as you said, there's been some of your peers you mentioned before who were doing other big developments or large developments. As you said, you prepared to fail, and you had a contingency plan for that, as well as the excess money in the funds in case it did go a wee bit pear-shaped like it did.
Yeah, I mean, we had the equity because our first couple of developments had built it, and then, as I said, we'd sold it down. So, and I remember Lockie McLeod, who was the CEO of South Canterbury, saying to me at the time that we were as good as anybody in his mortgage book.
Yeah.
I see he's starring on television at the moment. He's got a starring role in that South Canterbury fraud case.
So for people out there, advice, prepare to fail and get all the, go and get the right legal assistance and help from the right people and who have been there, who have done that and know what they're talking about. Any size development you go into, you have to have a fat figure in there in case it all goes wrong.
Hey Mark, I'll tell you what, the average chartered accountant and lawyer up and down the country are not used to dealing with these sorts of transactions, and they give the banks far too much.
Yep.
And these deals live or die on how you control banks.
Right.
Overseas, when I was in the States last year, they were lending me a heap of dough, and it was nil recourse. And I remember saying to the director of Bridge Capital who I was dealing with in Tennessee, I said, this is very interesting. Why are you lending me on nil recourse? Where we come from, it's all recourse to the principal borrower. And he said to me, Matthew, if I'm not happy with the deal you're doing, if the deal doesn't stand on its own merits, then I'm not going to do the deal. Your signature isn't worth anything to me. He said, I'm not going to chase you on the other side of the world. He said, I'm backing this deal because I believe in the deal you're doing. That's the attitude of the American businessman. But in New Zealand, there's a real puritanical accountability. I've heard a lot of talk about robber capitalism, which is an interesting sort of ethereal concept to think about. Here, there's a prevailing attitude coming out of the government. They're talking about piercing the corporate veil a lot more and piercing trusts, because the attitude of certainly some of the reviewers in government at the moment is that people should have all of their wealth on the line if they're going to be involved in business. And that's increasingly where this environment's going. There's an increasing appetite to open up trusts and increase your liability as a director, which worries me, and frankly will stop me doing business in this country.
Yeah, it will stop a lot of people doing business in the country, and they're the ones who are keeping the country moving forward, and the government. I think the government need people like that, and yourself who are doing that.
Yeah, I had close to 300 people as contractors or direct employees in the development businesses that I was running in my accounting practice, the bits and pieces I had going. And geez, if I had to have my entire family asset base on the line, there's just no way I'd do it. No way. Less business would be done.
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely. Okay, well, before we move on to the next part, I believe you've just finishing off a book at the moment. I dare to say it will be something to do with property. Does it touch on the large developments, or is it going to be what we're about to talk about, or tell us about it?
It's a book called Property 101, and it's a very simple look at buy and hold investment and how to structure it and how to do it in New Zealand. And it's something I believe in, that you gain tremendous wealth through just buying assets and not selling them in the right areas. Mark, my belief that if you get in capital growth areas, just hang on to assets and make the money coming in equal to the money going out, you get free wealth. You get the capital gain. It's non-taxable in this country. You don't need any tax benefit because the cash in equals the cash out. You make money three ways. You make it when you buy by getting a discount. You make it through the cash flow, and you make it through the capital growth over time. And I just talk about those 3 points, maximising those three ways to make money. Because a lot of people I find in the business of property, they know property is a good thing, but they've got no strategy, and they're not breaking their investments down into those three sections and making logical observations like, guess what? Some areas of New Zealand are not going to go up in value. And therefore it's money in equals money out. No capital gain. What are you doing it for? You're wasting your time. You're tying your precious access to capital up in something that's not creating you cash flow, and it's not going up in value. It's a waste of life. So the book really goes through the numbers of being a property investor at a very basic level, talks about structures, finance, the numbers, that sort of thing. So it's not really about development, it's about Property 101, how to be a good buy and hold investor.
That's good, and I come across surprisingly a number of people. They are saying, what's your strategy? What are you trying to achieve? And they don't really know. It's a dangerous situation to be in.
Exactly right. Yeah. How can you go somewhere if you don't know where you're going?
Absolutely. So what's the book called? Just Property 101.
Property 101. Yeah.
Right. Jolly good. And when's that out on the shelves there, Matt?
I'm thinking it'll be about June. They're pretty hard things to write books because the telephone rings about 90 times a day, and I get about 200 emails a day. So
great work. Yeah, it's one way to avoid it, I guess. Put it in a book and they can read it instead of ringing you. Great work. Okay, so we'll move on to the different types of deals, and as listeners will realise, Matthew's got quite of a knowledge in larger developments as well as the day-to-day smaller term developments or buy and holds and flips that people are probably a bit more used to, certainly what I'm more used to. So we'll go on and talk about some of these if you can. Now, the last podcast was on JV, so we won't go into that too much, but what would be your best advice, Matthew, on the sort of people you'd want to go into a JV with?
I'd stay away from inexperienced people. What I find is that, I do business deals with a lot of different people, but I make sure that they have an appetite for risk and they're experienced with risk and they're willing to lose the money. Because, stuff does not happen as you expect sometimes. And I just don't want the emotional baggage of dealing with somebody that says, this is your fault, or this is not my fault, or I can't afford to lose this money. So I'm very careful that I pick people that are like-minded, where if you do a deal and it doesn't come off as you expect, then they are on the same page as me, which is, oh well, it wasn't my last dollar. This is money I can afford to risk and lose. And if we don't make as much as we expect, well, that's business. And if we make more than we expect, well, that's a bonus. And during the investment, if you have stress, if you have things that aren't going right, well, that's business. Let's stay friends and be sensible and commercial about it. What's a good commercial response in this situation? Now, those are the sorts of people I look for, because life's short. I just don't need to deal with people that are highly strung, and I certainly don't want to lose somebody that is low net worth their only money that they've got. So other people that are doing JVs, I really recommend they pick their partners carefully.
Yeah, I can totally vouch for that, and I've had an experience of both sort of partners myself and JVs that I've done, and they're like-minded people are certainly one, and as I said, I've had a couple of good successes with people in the first JV that I've done, but I've also had an average sort of result the first time, and if they weren't like-minded and had the overall big picture, we wouldn't have had the success we had in the second and third.
Hey, Mark, I wrote a shareholders agreement a few years ago, and it came off the back of the most appalling experience I think I've ever had, where I was a minority shareholder. Maybe that's a little flamboyant. It's not the most appalling experience, but certainly violating experiences that I've had. Bunch of guys I knew, guys and girls, bought a boarding house in Wellington, and I was sort of piggybacking off another relationship I had with them, and because the money off the other relationship got voted to flow into this investment, I said, yeah, well, I'll go along, I won't cash up. So I just went along. But I was a minority, I was a non-director. And these guys, they budgeted 50 grand for a reno, 600 for the purchase price, and they spent 350 on the reno without talking. They then appointed their own management company, which got an 18% occupancy rate.
18. Right. Great. That's a good so far.
They then refinanced with a second tier financier the 200 grand of equity that the group had and asked me to sign PGs, and I said, you've got to be joking. I'm not. A, I don't agree to this. This is absurd. B, you've already ultra vires transacted without talking to us and spent 300 grand more than budget. C, I don't agree with this refinance of this equity, which they wanted to flow into something else. Second tier, I don't agree to using second tier financiers. If we're going to do this, we use cash. But I got steamrolled.
All right.
And they went to head, and about the only thing that was well structured in the entire transaction was the tax, which I did.
Yep.
And they then try and stuff that up. They wanted to revoke the QC election for some bizarre reason, so the losses wouldn't come through. And I just remember thinking, what the hell? There was only one thing that was right about this transaction. There was only one thing that I touched, and that was the tax.
Right.
Yeah, they're trying to stuff that up. So I had this awful experience, and I write about it in my book, actually. And at the end of it, I thought, well, how do you stop these sorts of situations happening to you? And obviously, you don't want to be a minority if you can avoid it. But a sort of recurring theme of this is people having problems with partnerships, for want of a better term. So I wrote this shareholders agreement, which is just a partnership agreement that applies to a company. You can use it for any structure, really. And what I said was the partners agree that they will fund pro rata, which is standard. So they will fund their percentage of the investment. The partners will fund their percentage equity and cash losses. And in the event that they fail to meet their obligations, which were funding and whatever else they were, that the non-defaulting partners had the right to invoke a power of attorney under the shareholders agreement to transfer the shares to the performing partners and to transfer the current account to the performing partners. So in other words, that if because what I've seen is situations where the cards go down, the environment becomes impaired, and the non-performing partners just walk away, and they don't care about their credit rating. So that leaves for want of a better term, the good guys who say, well, we do care, and they then cover the non-performing partners. They pay their share of cash flow that's not being paid. They meet the equity call if there's an equity call from the bank. They do all the work to fix the problem. And then at the end, the non-performing partner pops in and says, well, I'll have my share of profit, thank you.
Right.
They get it back, which I find morally abhorrent.
Absolutely.
So my view of life is if you go into a deal and you're all going to do what you say you're going to do, then you'll sign such an agreement that says if you don't, you lose your equity, as in the shares you've got, and you lose the shareholder's current account. And the other guys can just take it off you.
Right.
And what a beautiful thing, Mark, because it's such a, it's voluntary compliance. If you don't comply, you know the consequences. You lose access to the tax losses, which is right, because you're not funding them anymore.
That's right.
And you lose access to the upside. And under the shareholders' agreement, I also left in there the right to pursue for any shortfall at the end. So not only do you lose your voting, your equity rights, and your current accounts, you just lose the whole lot. You are person non grata moving forwards to that company, but also you're on the hook for any loss. They can come back after you. So the people that sign that agreement are the people that intend to do what they say they're going to do. No. And after a tough experience in this particular company down in Wellington I had, I became a little bit grouchy about my partners not doing what they say they're going to do.
So you have in every agreement now.
Yeah. But, it's for courses, but certainly it's especially useful for people you don't know.
Yep.
Because if you don't know someone and you're doing a deal with them, you don't know them that well, this certainly keeps them on their toes.
And especially if something I haven't been involved in, all my JVs already have been with one person or two. If you have any more than two people in particular, I guess that becomes really important because you can't you can control yourself and you can have some sort of control over one other person, I guess. But if there's more than two or three or four like the Wellington experience, that certainly that covers all parties, doesn't it?
And structurally, JVs can be so tricky too because, as I said, a good structure plans to fail and plans to succeed. And on the plan for fail front, it's not only about asset protection and ring fencing to make sure that you can't have the financiers domino into your private trusts and so forth. That needs attention. But it's also about saying, if we make a loss, where should that loss end up and make sure that's next to profit so you can get some tax benefit out of it. And that's so the key that if you have a problem, the loss needs to be accessible. So many people put the shares of JVs or their interest in JVs through limited partnerships or however they're structuring it into trusts, but then they lock the losses into the trust and they can't get them. And the skeptic would say the advisor wants to sell them another trust so they can make some money out of their trusts because that's what the lawyers do or the accountants do. And it can actually be terrible tax advice. You've got to think, where should I have my loss? And where do I want my loss? And structure the JV accordingly.
Just moving on then, hey, different types of deals, and I've got these in no particular order, but there's quite a people out there doing a lot of stuff right now. They've done a lot of stuff for years and decades gone by. So I'd just love to get your sort of your knowledge about some of these. So in no particular order, the first one we'll talk about will be flips. And structure-wise, what would be your number one rule for developers and traders when they're doing these flips?
So flips, buying and selling property, trying to contemporaneously settle, but otherwise settling in on selling.
Yeah, a bit of both. So yes, a bit of contemporaneous type stuff as well as actually buying the places, renovating. And I'm meeting some people. I'm meeting people every day that have actually settled the properties, renovated, and are having trouble selling. I'm seeing that a lot in Auckland at the moment.
Yeah, the Auckland market's actually falling in the investor end. So actually makes me laugh. Digress, Mark. I remember in 2007, October 2007, I flicked an email out to our database and got 30-something thousand people in our database that subscribed to GRA. And I sent an email out and said, the lights are out. And I got some hate mail back from real estate agents around the country. And they're saying to me, oh, you're a glass is half empty guy. And I was tempted to reply, yeah, well, I've got about 42 million out there to want at the moment. And I've got about friggin' X many million in Australia going at the moment. So, yeah, glass is pretty full for me right now, I think, anyway. But I'm tempted to send the same email right now And it's not to say that I think that property is on toast in this country, because it's definitely not. I see rosy times ahead for property, especially Auckland, where you've got such a supply imbalance, as we discussed the other night over our vinos. But what you are seeing at the moment is these LVR rules have taken first-time buyers out of the market, and they've set property traders who are highly leveraged on their arse, and investors who are all wanting to borrow 85, 90, 95%, all of them are on their arse at the moment. They've got to cash up their existing position to retransact. But the existing positions, through the lack of liquidity in the market, has meant that a lot of them are sitting on negative equity. And there's no buyers because no one can get finance. And it's extremely frustrating for all of the property traders and flippers out there. But this is what happens. You get a change of environment. In this case, it's a government intervention, with Reserve Bank intervention with these LVR rules. And, those rules are saying no lending over 80%, or only 10% of lending over 80% is the October change. And the more recent change in late February 2014 was the rules applying to those with 5 or more residential investment properties, requiring them to be treated as a business and funded as a commercial operation, which means anywhere between 25 to 40% deposits and more expensive money. And, so the government said, okay, the larger investors, you're now out of the market because you've got to be 25 to 40% funded through equity. And the little guys, they got taken out last October, so that's a reduction in liquidity. So this affects first-time buyers in investor markets like South Auckland. South Auckland's just dead at the moment.
Yeah.
But if you go into the middle to top end stuff, it's still business as usual. A lot of Chinese money around, and that's really still driving markets. That's not answering your question. I'm sorry, I digressed.
Oh, it does. In one way, it does. It's a good intro to flips or renos, because that now more than ever in the last 5 years, and it's been what I've done a lot of the last 5 years. You have to be very smart when you buy. It has to be the right property to buy. And as you said, with buying to renovate for the first home buyer, isn't necessarily a great option right now. The money, the people who can afford a $600,000 to $800,000 property aren't necessarily the first home buyer, and they've still got the money and the finance to do it. As you said, you go to the better areas.
I would say that if you're in the business of flipping and you were buying in the last half of 2013 or January 2014, that's a little mini peak right there, because we've just taken a hit in terms of the liquidity in the market. Now, that will restart. At first, the market wants to see blood. And we are seeing it. I'm buying some spectacular deals. I've bought 7 houses in Auckland in the last 2 months. And 6 of them are since I had a vino with you the other night.
That wasn't so long ago. Five of them since I've been over with you the other night. And we're getting some great deals just because the vendors can't find a buyer and they're panicking. So what's a great deal to me? A great deal is a net yield in Auckland above 7. That's stunning. Yep.
And 20% discount. And I've done 5 in the last month that meet that criteria. That's pretty good.
Okay, can I just ask what all the listeners will be thinking right now, Matthew? How do you get 20% under value?
And I'm using Marsh & Irwin as my valuation company.
Okay.
Who are very conservative, South Auckland.
Yep.
I'm not going to name where I'm getting them because I am getting them off a theme. And I thought, and to be honest, it's commercially sensitive information.
Yes, yep.
But I am getting the deals at the moment. And let me just put it this way. Rich Mastery did have some very clever and simple intellectual property. They talked about the 6 Ds. They're the source of financially distressed property. What are they? Divorced people, debank, developers, people with destination timeframes, do-ups, and dumb people. There's the 6 Ds, and there's 20 Ds. You can think of more of them. What I find is that clusters of Ds seem to hang out together, and they hang out the same place. So If you want to find divorced people, go and talk to a divorce lawyer. If you want to find people with financial distress who are not very good at dealing with it, go to Citizens Advice Bureau and tell them you help people with financial problems, particularly the ones with houses. Go find people that meet your criteria. But the number one rule, Mark, is stay away from real estate agents. And I know you're a real estate agent, so you want to shoot me for something.
Of sorts there, Matthew. An upside-down real estate
You're
agent.
the right type of real estate agent. You're a buyer's agent. So you're actually doing what I'm doing and finding the houses that distressed people own.
That's right.
So you're on the right side of it. But it makes sense. If you want to get a top price, you use a real estate agent. They're your best friend. That's how you get the maximum market value on the day. But if you want to get the lowest purchase price, you need to deal with people that fit into the 6Ds, dead people, dumb people, divorced people, and you've got to find those people that are not being properly represented, or the smart real estate agent gets a high market value. It's not rocket science, is it?
No, absolutely.
So I'm buying behind the market, and I'm using strategies to get behind the market. I'm getting at people who are financially distressed before they go and see a real estate agent.
And the biggest way you mentioned earlier on in the conversation about the 3 ways to make money, and for far as I'm concerned, the biggest way to make money is when you buy. You can never get that back, can you?
Yeah. So I'm doing really simple nuts and bolts transactions at the moment because I think that this is right across the country. It's not just an Auckland thing. You can do this anywhere across the country. Target parts of the market that are particularly distressed from these LVR rules, reducing the amount of purchases available in the environment, and go find people that are upside down, and there are a few out there. And there's a little, and then talk the problems up to them. You've got to say, my goodness, there's no finance around. Seems like the market's going down. Talk the distress up, and you'll find lots of people fear and greed. They tend to run one way or the other. They'll sell assets cheap at the moment.
Oh, there's some great tips probably on how to find.
We still haven't talked about the original.
Well, it's quite good. We've actually gone on how to buy flips and how to buy and holds.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
And that's the most critical part of both, anyway.
Let's talk to flips now. I'm not a big fan of flips. I talked to you about this before we came on. I'll tell you why I'm not a fan, and that is you give away 66% of your profit, which to me is just stupid. And so why do you give away 66% of your profit? Well, 33% for income tax, assuming you're in the upper income tax bracket. The GST is 13%. And I know you're going to tell me that GST rate's 15%. But when you sell something, GST is 13% of the selling price, roughly. Okay, so if you sell something for 200 grand plus GST, 15% of 200 grand is 30. So what is the GST content of 230? It's 13. 13 off is 15 on. That's a useful number to know. So when you're flipping, when you sell something for 230 grand, 30 grand of that is GST, and roughly speaking, that'll be 13% of your margin. And 33 goes to income tax, so that's 46. Where does the other 20% go? Well, roughly 20% of your profit will go to the real estate agent.
Right.
So you lose 2/3. And on average, you get a third back. Whereas if you just kept the property and didn't sell it, well, straight away you triple your return. So, and if you do that in areas, if you're smart enough to do a flip and get all that profit, surely you're smart enough to hold it, then pay no tax. And if you do that in areas that have lots of capital growth, you get paid firstly up front by buying at a discount, secondly through capital growth because it's going up in value because you pick your area right. And then the trick is make sure that the money in equals the money out. You've got good net yields. So I'm not really a huge fan of flipping, but I do understand that some people have limited income and they need to flip to generate an income, to generate a deposit so that they can then buy the next investment property.
Okay, we'll take a break here, and when we come back next week, we'll continue talking about different types of deals, flips or renos, holding, lease options, protecting your assets, and a lot more. If you would like to make any suggestions for future interviews, you can contact us at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoyed part 1.